Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. Меня зовут Кирилл.
My name is Karin Kasminsky, and I will be the moderator of our very interesting section, and we will be discussing alternative crediting. We have as speakers Natalia Ignatenko from Planeta.ru, Malika Isaev from a legal company, Zartsin and Partners, Vladimir Kazinets from Rolf Company, Alexander Suhotin from Coffee Crowding Platform, Mikhail Tainov is from Cross Technologies. As soon as we will be talking about crowdlending, which is part of digital technology, we have an address. Colleagues, while our technicians are getting ready, I would like to say what we'll be talking about: modern trends and ways of alternative crediting on the Russian market, what should be done to attract funding for a musician and a business people, how this fee is regulated, what trends of cooperative funding exist, aspects of IT security, because these platforms are digital ones and it's important to provide for security not only of data but also of money. Could you please start it? Dear friends, I would like to greet you at the IPQuorum. I wish you success, good proposals. Intellectual property and digital economy for us are two interrelated things. We've passed the law which allows to use biometric data to get financial services. We've introduced smart contracts, and now we are considering the bill, which is about digital financial assets, regulating of financial digital platforms. And by passing these laws, we hope to put everything in good order to get rid of unauthorized players, to give a chance to work to crowdfunding platforms, which can be used for attracting investments for all kinds of projects, for startups, for technological projects related to implementation of intellectual property in real life. And we hope that your discussions in the course of the quorum will allow to consider your opinion, to update the existing bills, and your professional opinion will help us to make the right decisions and pass good laws. I would like to wish you success, and we are expecting good quality proposals from you. That was an address of the head of the Committee on Finance of the State Duma. Have you ever participated in crowdlending or crowdfunding as an investor or an author of a project? Of course, the speakers. So, crowd services are present, but they are not common overall. I would like to pass the floor to Natalia Ignatenko from Planeta.ru. You are the oldest crowdfunding platform. Please tell us what authors need to know to be able to get the necessary amount of funding. How much money can be raised using your platform? What steps should be made by authors? Good morning, dear participants. It's a pleasure for me to be here on the National Space Day. For me, to tell you about my favorite planet, planet.ru. I will be talking about crowdfunding and what can be achieved using that. In the beginning, we'll talk about the peculiarities of crowdfunding projects. What's the difference of this way of funding from others that we will discuss? Every crowdfunding project is dedicated to a certain idea, and at the start, before people start funding this or that crowdfunding project, the author identifies the budget and time frame for the project. He or she says how much money he needs within which period of time he plans to do that. Please don't scroll through my presentation. I will do it myself. In advance, an author says, IT technologies are not serving us. Upload the presentation and I will manage it myself. Crowdfunding is a very honest and transparent instrument because if within the term announced by the author the money is not raised, all the money goes back to those who invested the money. Every participant of crowdfunding project gets for its contribution a remuneration, and unlike colleagues, this remuneration is not material. It can't be a share in a company or a percent in income. This is a gadget, this is a CD disc, and any other product of a crowdfunding project. This sounds interesting, but many are deceived when they hear the word fun in crowdfunding. Joke. Yeah, it looks like a joke, but all the authors of crowdfunding projects are sure that this is a serious thing. It's just a locomotive to attract, you need someone to attract participants to the project. What can be achieved by crowdfunding? What objectives can be reached? Funding as such, and this objective is in the name of the term crowdfunding, people's funding. When a big number of people gets an opportunity to decide whether your project should be implemented or not, shall be implemented or not. The average amount which authors receive, 500,000 rubles, but sometimes these are millions. And the leader was in 2016, and that was Alisa rock music group, and they raised more than 11 million rubles for their new album, and that record lasted for 2 years, and in September 2018 it was beaten by an 18-year-old chap who decided to print a book, Harry Potter, and that was it was a fanfic, an internet fanfic, and he decided to produce it as a printed version. The next function which can be exercised is attraction of the audience. I would like to tell you about a photographer, Ivan Hafizov, who made himself up with crowdfunding. He travels around Russia and takes pictures of street signs. And in 2014, he decided to create a virtual museum of street signs. It was supported 75 times, and he is a record keeper of Russian crowdfunding with regard to the total budget, and every year he manages to raise several million rubles for publishing calendars with road signs. And if you have your audience, when you are a known performer as the Mummy Troll group, and it allows to reduce distance between you and your fans, and together with your fans to create something together. Another function is to check whether the idea is good or not. In the beginning of the project, you understand whether the idea will be in demand among the audience or not, whether people will be ready to invest or not. Crowdfunding, in this sense, is a very good presentation of a project in front of an investor who is ready to invest great amounts of money. He gets a very clear feedback about the demand, the popularity, potential popularity of this future product, because it is a lot easier. It is a lot more complicated to vote for the project with money compared to an opinion poll. This is the most honest and reliable voting. There were examples when our projects, after successful crowdfunding, found proper investors. Crowdfunding is used as a pre-order. It's a delayed purchase, and as a remuneration, you can offer something which you haven't created yet. This is our first project, the B2 musical group project, who in 2011 produced a CD. 11 years have passed, and since then more than 700 projects were successfully implemented, and more than 1 billion rubles were raised through crowdfunding. This is the amount which should be divided into many actors, and the average receipt is 1,300 rubles. And over the 7 years, Planet became not only a crowdfunding service, but a big crowdfunding network involving various services. There is a school of crowdfunding where we teach authors in crowdfunding in how to organize campaign. There is a shop where they can sell their crowdfunding projects, goods from the crowdfunding projects. It's endless, boundless as a tool, and interesting for authors and for sponsors. And this is the way of influencing the implementation of potentially interesting ideas. Thanks for listening. Natalia, thank you. It's very interesting that a beginning author can raise money as well as experienced performers. And now I would like to shift to investment crowdfunding, and I'm passing the floor to a representative of the crowdfunding platform, City of Money. You are one of the biggest in Russia. Tell us what is crowdlending, and what's the difference between it and other ways of funding? Why don't we need banks? How can you finance business directly? I hope I will have no difficulties with my presentation. It seems so. Crowdfunding is a wide phenomenon, including crowdlending, crowd investing, which is not correct. Crowdfunding can be a non-commercial story. Crowdlending and crowd investing is about money. Crowd investing is an analog of venture investments, but instead of venture investments or investor, these are a great number of private investors, and crowdlending is mutual crediting. This is what we do. The company Gorodenik City is the very first crowdlending platform for small businesses in Russia. The Gorodenik is part of the international group Microcapital. We are represented in 18 countries. We are crediting SMEs for more than 10 years. And in the last years, we have developed a new activity, car sharing. And this subsidiary is part of our holding company. If we speak about P2P crediting worldwide, crowdlending is not in novelty. It's mainstream of crediting technologies, and such big institutions as Citigroup, JP Morgan have developed and launched their crowdfunding platforms. Is it an alternative to banks? Yes and no. If we speak about the total replacement of bank crediting, this would be fair to say. As far as Russia is concerned, this is probably so. I will explain why. I speak at various forums where they speak about crediting SMEs, and various foundations, state, non-state foundations, banks, they say that they are increasing the amount of credits, but in response they receive an ironical smile from SMEs representatives. Crediting of SMEs is not developed in Russia in the form which it should have. Many of our banks, they are not sometimes technically ready, and the biggest players, which are technologically sufficient, they should respond to the requirements of the regulator, which became more and more stringent, and this means circumstances of borrowing money from SMEs are getting more and more difficult, while crowdfunding is an easy way for a developing business, for a startup, to get money. How do we work in a greater detail? Gorod Denik is the first online crediting platform in Russia. We have been working since 10 years ago. More than 80,000 transactions we had in the first 5 years for more than 3.1 billion rubles. We lend money for from 3 to 36 months. The average amount is 1,200,000. And these are mostly small businesses, micro businesses, individual business people. The share of individual business people is greater than the number of companies limited, and it's from 70 to 30% of annual interest rate. This is also for this rate works for borrowing money and for investing money. We don't ask for collateral. Sometimes we do when it is not a quite clear transaction, and the procedure is done online with a qualified electronic signature. Neither the borrower nor the investors need to go somewhere. Everything happens on our digital platform. Scoring. Here, I would like to stop in a greater detail on this topic. Crowdfunding is a trendy thing, and today, because of the attitude to the banks and because of the requirements of the state getting more and more strict to banks, so that's why more and more potential clients are looking in our direction. We work in the epoch of technologies. Sometimes they say that 1 hour is enough for borrowing money, and in SMEs, with SMEs, it's different, because unfortunately there are negative cases, when a technological company with financial background says we are lending money within 24 hours, but when it's the matter of default and delayed payments, then they can't offer that. This is how it works. You need to be very responsible. We risk money of, we put money of private investors at risk. That's why if we aim at being being prompt and speedy, and if we ignore scoring, then we can find ourselves in a difficult situation. We are more flexible than banks. We are faster. Decisions are made in 1 or 2 days, plus 2 or 3 days for collecting money. But we do range a company, a borrow according to a certain rating, but not on detrimentally to the quality. What else should I say about our company? It's a big ecosystem. In order to get data from our borrowers and to be the most quick, we integrate and to various payment system, online cash marketplaces, stock exchanges, and we are ready to develop, and we develop products for marketplaces. And this is very important because there are attempts to automate scoring SMB. And if there are representatives of banks, they understand that in the last 10, 15 years, like waves, they emerge proposals to increase scoring, and it will be as efficient as with physical entities, with individuals. But it can work if we speak about niche products, financial products. As part of the state order for certain financial products, the risk of default is 0.1, 0.2%, and so on and so forth. That's why our company actively involves and develops the partnership network, and we will carry on doing it, and not only in terms of increasing the clients and increasing the income, but also increasing the amount of data which we which we need for analysis. Now, 30 seconds are left. Another important thing I want to mention is that in our group of functioning, there is a factoring company, a leasing company, and a micro crediting company. Our micro crediting company is an anchor investor. We say to our investors, look, we also risk with our money, and in every project from 10 to 30% we invest our money through our anchor crediting company. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks for listening.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much also for the international overview. Now I would like to give the floor to Alexander Zopotin, representative of the digital crowdfunding platform. Could you tell us about your digital platform? What's your niche? Thank you, Kirill, and good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you, colleagues, for the interesting discussion. I think it's important that we are doing the same thing. Maybe from externally, someone can say that we have secrets and we don't want to share know-how, but it's not so. All of us, each of us has a niche. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Secondly, alternative lending is our subject. It's probably more about intellectual property. We think that intellectual property is an asset. It can generate profit. It can be used as a tool to raise borrowed funds. Very often we meet musicians which developed an album, and then in order to conduct concerts, you need money, and you need to raise funds, borrowed funds. In fact, there is no alternative to a copyright holder, because it's impossible to go to the bank. Banks are not interested in any collaterals that are intangible, that you cannot touch or see. It's something incomprehensible for banks, because some limitations are imposed by our central bank, and the intellectual property area remains not very mature. That is why there is no alternative for copyright holders, for a film director, for other than look for funding in the market, look for alternative funding other than public funding. It was a starting point for the coffee platform. There are two competencies. One is crowdfunding, because there is a great interest in creative projects. People are willing to donate projects of that nature. So, for example, that story with musicians, and there is a demand for projects enabling us to generate money and to enable people not only to promote a creative project but also to earn money. The focus is on intellectual property, and the basis for a business model is that intellectual property is going to serve as a collateral. It would be impossible to create a platform separately from the whole infrastructure. When we speak about a collateral, the collateral needs to be evaluated. There need to be some tools. So in case of default, what will happen, how the collateral be enforced by creditors. We understood from the beginning that we will be a component of IP chain in all the intellectual property transactions. On the basis of that infrastructure, we can build up business processes in such a way that all the components of our life cycle can be reflected online, and we can record all possible changes. I provide you with the very brief information about our platform. I try for you just to get an idea how our mechanisms work. And then I would like to appeal to all the market players. We live now in such an environment this year and last year when many initiatives came up. We see the initiatives from the central bank, the quick pay systems, the introduction of some registers of collaterals. It can be also associated with some scoring models with the borrower passport, describing their history from various banks. And also it's about the facilitation of codification of individuals, how to collect data for a specific user. Many changes are taking place. For us, it's important to keep record of those changes and understand how it works. I would like to give you an example. According to our feeling, when we started to do this, we felt like being on board an airplane. When an airplane is trembling and you have an unusual feeling. So while taking off and landing, so the feelings are quite similar to what we experienced. So we undertake the risk of losing our investors' money. these risks are assumed by the platform's users. In case of any carelessness or inaccuracy in planning, then it can create a negative image for the platform, because it can also happen so that some fraudulent actions are taken. We should be rather careful about how our platforms will be perceived by others and what reputation they will have. Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon, colleagues. Can you hear me? I'm head of the operations department. I'm dealing with the operations of the platform. The platform is not operated yet. We are collecting information on how it can work in our niche. It's unique, unlike our colleagues on the left. We have a genuine B2B platform when individuals can invest. I think there are no platforms in Russia which can lend money to individuals. They started to come up, and we are very active in using collaterals. It's used as a security of financing, and also intellectual property is involved. It's a unique project, not only in Russia but in and globally. At least I don't know many examples either in Europe or in the States. There are many associated legal and banking issues. How to build up a stable platform. I see here representatives of the Novivec Bank. Novivec Bank. We work with that bank. There was some news yesterday that the central bank introduces the quick pay system from individuals to legal entities. It can be. It's a bomb. It can kill other methods of financing. With my smartphone, I transfer money from me as an individual to a legal entity, and it can be regarded as a bomb, because we were thinking how to build a system, how to identify. There are many identification tools from Alpha Bank and other players. If the quick pay system can be applied, it will have a great impact on the financing system in Russia. There are many questions concerning identification between individuals and companies. According to the Federal Law 115, we are responsible to investors, because a borrower is someone who calls himself a borrower. My colleagues representing the legal sector will tell more details. So there are nominal banks, nominal accounts. Who knows what a nominal account is? Studying other platforms, we realize that each platform is operated differently. There is no unique standard how to run nominal accounts on platforms. So you can see a bank, and there is a law, everything should be the same, but everyone works differently. So a nominal account is opened for an individual participant. Now we are working on a model which we are going to adjust with our lawyers and IT professionals. We are also planning to talk to the central bank and obtain some subsidies from them for our project.
Виктор, Александр, спасибо большое.
Alexander, thank you for describing your platform and the plans. And now I would like to pass the floor to Malika Isaeva. It's necessary to understand how, from the legal point of view, the regulation is done. What are the plans? Maybe you will be telling us how it is done on the space, in the space of the European and Asian unit, Euro-Asian unit. I will be talking about not only P2P, but also P2P services. I will be speaking about crowd lending platforms like the previous speaker. The situation in the legal environment as it is today and as it will be tomorrow. Today, the majority of platforms use different contract models which they can use in the frame of the civil code. Part use the agent contract and also the service rendering contract. The platform offers services both to investors and borrowers. The most important question is not when we enter a contract. The problems start when default breaks out, when money of the lenders need to be paid back, and when courts consider these models of contracting valuable, then they pass the sentence in favor of the investors. But because of the accepts and identification and authentication, certain problems emerge. And how acceptation takes place. If it is an electronic signature, which is the due way, the most easily evidenced. However, many platforms use a simple, not an authorized, but simple electronic signature. Or an SMS code, which is a simple electronic signature, and then it can be a problem with regard to identification. Was it me who did it? Was it from my device that it was that the SMS code was uploaded? The acceptation. If it is an acceptation with payment, which is the easiest as evidence in court. It is necessary to prove the court that a money lending contract was entered using the platform, and I got the money not to earn money from that. I got it under a borrowing contract, and I need to pay you the penalties if necessary and the interest rate. Then what's necessary is to collect the amount of evidence sufficient for the court. the practice of using simple electronic signatures and accepts is wide, and it's related not only to crowdlending but also online borrowing. Log files are accepted by courts along with screenshots. However, in 2018, sentences are passed when judges say that log file is not enough and it's not a solid evidence to prove that the contract was entered. The problem with identification also emerges. There was a case when one person was sleeping and his friend used his computer and borrowed through micro lending, and then the court charged an interest rate and a penalty. The problem is also about the settlements on the platform. The main idea is that the owner of the account, the operator of the platform, can receive money to the platform, but the money belongs to the investors, beneficiaries, and in agents models, settlement account is used. And the risk for the money on investors is that if the platform is debts in the future, the money can be arrested, and this money doesn't belong to the platform but to the investor. It's not allowed to do that when it's the money of beneficiaries. But practical problems emerge. Not many banks allow to open a nominal account for commercial organizations, some 3 or 4 banks, and new questions about charging emerge. Bailiff makes a decision to arrest the money, but the money of the investors shouldn't be put at risk. But this is what is happening today in the framework of the legislation. What will be happening in the future? Now there is a bill in our Duma on crowdfunding to regulate those investment platforms. We have heard about this bill, and what's the view of the regulator? The operator of the platform becomes a subject of the federal law on that. The law will regulate relations P2P services. If it is a classical P2P, then it will be out of regulation because it clearly says that the borrowers can be individual people or legal entities. It can be there will be elements of a licensing model because the overall regulation will be done within the investment platform framework. The regulator wants to regulate both operators and the platforms themselves. And there are technical requirements to platforms, a possibility to follow all the contracts done on that platform. There will be a register of crowdfunding platforms, and only those who are on the register will be authorized to be involved in these activities. Requirements to operators will be also there. There will be requirements to directors and founders, and they're very similar to requirements related to the bonds market. There will be a provision on regulating the conflicts, which is not the case at the moment. It's only the platform knows which borrowers are reliable, because there are those who are not reliable. This matter needs to be regulated. to make sure that that it is known which borrowers are reliable and which are not. Another matter is about scaling, and we are only discussing the possibility of doing it in the Euro-Asian context. Lack of regulation in the countries of the Union. And I will give Kazakhstan as an example, when it's a physical entity which is a borrower and an investor.
Модель на уровне заключаемых договоров и общем регулировании будет работать. Вот это в целом те моменты, которые хотели осветить сегодня. Спасибо.
So this is what I wanted to say today.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. The protection of information, the protection of investors' right. Mikhail Tonov, head of the Cross Technologies company. Good afternoon. Thank you. Colleagues, several times it was mentioned today that the trust to platforms is very important. What we see, the platforms of crowdfunding and crowd investing will increase in popularity, and more and more money will be involved of investors. Everything is fine. This business has a potential. Wonderful. What next? A key driver in terms of safety in using new services include legal guarantees and other guarantees, so that service users could understand what this service is about, who is the founder, who provides funding, and who are those people who ask for funding. Transparency is essential here. And well, we have related issues such as there are risks of legal risks, the possibility of having fraudulent actions when people can get unauthorized access to personal accounts. There is a screenshot from banks. All of us know that banks know the fraudulent action when some money can be illegally deducted. So it's been since long ago that such actions have been counted. We have more new innovative services, and perhaps people pay less attention to them. And the means involved may be insufficient. We should understand that investors and borrowers, with regard to any service, client, online bank, or a crowdfunding, funding can be re-engineered. If they would like to get their money or send something, it can also be also cracked, or some money can be transferred to an unknown destination. What controls should we apply in crowd investing? So one is KYC, so that we understand who our customer is, to identify them, and then scoring. My colleagues have told we need to have it for sure. And the second one is AML. So that's how our platforms become subject to the Federal Law 115. When a platform is used for a reason different from how it was described in the regulation, in the statute, then the business can be closed. So this provision of the Federal Law 115 remains relevant. And the third part is fraud monitoring. That means an understanding that the money of the platform members will not disappear. And what is a fraud analysis involves mechanisms providing for identifying fraudulent operations. You can also fake an electronic digital signature. There was an example, someone is sleeping and you conduct an action and there will be a loss. And what are those mechanisms helping us evaluate the actions of users from the point of view of financial information, who transfers what and whom? We have both financial and non-financial mechanisms. There are so-called biological fingerprints, so the behavior of users, how a person uses a computer mouse, the keyboard, and for example, we realize that a human being will be incapable of doing some actions, and that's how we trace such unauthorized actions. You can speak a lot about these topics. So anyway, these should involve both organizational actions and some IT components. 30 seconds left. This is the operational scheme, how we work. Operation means anything, depositing money, transferring money to a bank, to a certain account. Every time when we have a cash flow, it can be about a financial operations. Or when it comes to fingerprints, biological fingerprints that I've mentioned before, it can be analyzed with a certain model. That's how we can differentiate between good and evil. When it is about non-compliance with the Federal Law 115, for example, if the main operation was conducted with the help of an SMS, then you receive a command, please repeat your action again. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I hope that the matters of protecting information, the algorithms, will be developing with the same speed. A question to Vladimir. You are an expert in cooperative funding. In the cooperative sector, which alternative ways, instruments of funding do you discuss? Can there be a similarity found between crowd investments, crowd lending? What's your opinion about the trend of developing alternative funding means? Thank you very much for the organizers for inviting me, because I am a person from a different planet. Speaking of planets, you need to understand that I come from a different segment. I work with different amounts of money. I used to work in Norilsk Nickel, and my friend worked in Gazprom, and she called me once and said, "I'm so tired of those billions, billions, and billions. Irina, just use dollars for all the calculations."
Я понял, что сначала идет «Газпром», потом долго никого нету, потом все остальное.
That's why it's the matter of amounts. Yes, our story is a little bit different, but I'm very much interested in listening to colleagues. I do see certain crisscrossings. We are organized in a different way because the actors are different. If we talk about
Время, долгие годы, ну, во-первых, профессия не такая уже.
cooperative treasury, and those emerged in the early 2000s in Lukoil and Norilsk Nickel. Cooperative treasury is a costs tool providing liquidity of companies for it to be solvent in payments. And secondarily, it's a way of effective placement of money. And the keyword is time. If we are talking about investments, this is a different component, different terms and different approaches. We are talking about less than 1 month, and the horizon of funding is 1, 2 months, 6 months, more seldom. That's why treasurers have a wish to place their money well, but it's usually bumps into looking better rates in banks. It limits to looking better rates, and there is no play between an investor and a borrower. Our task is to make payments. If we don't have enough, we borrow short loans from money, and if we have excessive money, we put them in banks. And treasuries have a global task. Is not earning. This is not an active department. It's a support unit of any company. Until recently, the similarity is that companies divided into 2 parts: cash generator and cash negative. Companies which generate excessive cash all the time, and companies which consume excessive cash all the time. If we speak about retail, car retail, then it's a leverage company. We are in debt all the time, and we are attracting money. While telecommunication companies or metallurgy, oil production companies, they generate cash. Because of the need of introducing the money in production, and they're looking for where to put the money, those excessive money. And I will, at some conferences, I made presentations together with Ilya Sontsev, the director of the Treasury of Megafond. We had very similar presentations, and the idea of Ilya's presentation was about his headache about how to place money with the biggest rate, and my main task was where to borrow at the lowest rate. This is a philosophical conception, and we called it doors. This doesn't mean that I like rock music. It was about the role of cooperative treasurers on the international market. This phenomenon of a treasurer develops. People are upgrading their professional skills. A big number of bankers, they come to treasurers as employees. My all colleagues are former bankers, and they execute philosophy of bankers for fine-tuning of the most efficient placement of money. While we were thinking, the blank interbank market died, and we have the idea of reviving it. And the idea of doors is to create an ecosystem for 4 types of transactions. Initially, we wanted to create a platform where corporations could give money to each other without banks' involvement, but then we understood that it was wrong. And we decided then to develop other alternatives. And we're talking about 2 types of transactions. This doesn't work in practice. This looks like a puzzle, which you assemble bit by bit, and it doesn't boom in development. The majority of treasurers have the task of keeping liquidity of the company and not earn money. Our task is to be more active on the money market through adaptation of a platform and creation of platforms to trade money for these 4 types of transactions: bank to bank, an interbank, bank and corporate, a credit, corporate, a bank, a deposit, and corporate. And here the instruments are being discussed. A borrowing contract is a possibility, but psychologically no one is ready from the affiliated companies to give money to each other, to lend money to each other. It's very important to create a single agreement base. We want to create a platform, a single deposit credit documentation for money market. This will be a platform, and there is no need to create them. They exist: Bloomberg, the Moscow Stock Exchange, RTS board, and others. The Delta system, which used to be a purely bank platform. We want to develop it for corporates. There is no need to invent a wheel. We can use what there is. This is the most simple. It's more complicated to use the acquisition processes. From bank to a corporate, from corporate to corporate, it's even more complicated. That's why the idea was to create an information hub with the documents certified with authorized electronic signature. And we are now negotiating the possibility of doing it with some of the existing partners. And the third task is the most difficult: to develop credit risk management of corporations. Corporations where they have delayed payments, when they assess the risks of their clients, it's necessary to give instruments to companies to be able to assess credit risks. In some companies, this is developed. In others, it's not well developed. After 2 years of discussion of the first 3 things, we developed the 4th one, an interesting idea, which is interesting in theory, but it doesn't exist in practice. Treasurers themselves, they are not much interested in that. They prefer to sit at a desk. They earn enough salary. That's why they don't want to do anything extra. And the 4th task involves working with top managers, following performance indicators. So this is what is happening among treasurers. And this is what we do together with bankers. As far as instruments are concerned, there are interesting cross points. The money lending contract, is one thing, and we were thinking about adapting it. And the Moscow Stock Exchange helped us by simplifying the issue of bonds, classical bonds from the past for big amounts of money. And there was no sense in entering the markets with less than 3, 4, 5 billion rubles. Now it's different. It can be a bonds program when you say that for within 10 years you want to issue bonds for 10 billions. What's the minimal amount? Until recently, it was 3 million. 3 billion to provide the secondary liquidity. If there is no need to provide for the secondary liquidity, then one of the most interesting cases in this respect, if we discuss the segment mentioned by the colleagues, a more simplified issue of bonds, junk bonds, high-risk bonds with an increased profitability, with a simplified process of issue. There is no need to there is no need for the emittent to disclose. Nevertheless, he enters the market of capital, and depending on the amounts it's entering the market with, if it's the company, a transportation company called Gruzovichkov, they last year entered the market with 2 tranches with 50 million rubles and 40 million rubles, and the profitability they had about 18%. And now these bonds are sold for 103% from the nominal, meaning the profitability between 15 and 17%. This kind of bonds, and we are also discussing the matter of commercial papers, which are bonds, reincarnation of vexels in electronic form. In Europe and America, they used to have it booming in the past. But this is closer to crowdfunding platforms because those bonds are sold for within a certain number of investors. Before, it was considered that commercial papers and junk bonds are more relevant for high-risk investments, startups, small companies with low crediting quality. But if we speak again about the DOS program, this is a good alternative for lending. Some corporates buying bonds from other corporates for short periods of time is an existing practice. Corporates are now promised to have a direct access to the stock exchange without any brokers. The emergence of those papers will allow to forward this amount of liquidity to the market, and it will be interesting to work with this money. Because the picture on the money market has changed. In the past, it was 5, 10, 3 billion rubles for 3 years. Now it's 50, 60, 60 million for up to 1 year of bonds. And another thing, I didn't plan to talk about it, but colleagues provoked me for mentioning it.
This thing let us use an instrument which has never been used before by corporate bodies corporate. Briefly speaking, I don't know, most likely you had an experience of that kind. It concerns mortgage lending. Mortgage banks which provide mortgage loans, they set certain requirements and they issue specific bonds, making it possible to refinance them. And no matter what price it is, let's say 100 apartments in Moscow will be leased out, and then some money will be received on a nominal account, and then there is a possibility of refinancing. And today, I don't know if any securized securities are issued. We actively discuss it. It was possible to do it before, but how interesting it is for potential treasury managers, for example, like Gorodinik, what Armen was telling. During the break, we discussed it, and so we had time to speak about it. Okay. As a private investor, so I will do something when I get money. So it's a funny aspect. So treasury managers should not have money.
И говорят, Вов,
When my friends call me, so can you tell me where to invest dollars, euros, or real estate? I have a problem. I have debts to pay for the apartment. I don't need that. But I hope my financial standing is going to improve and I will be able to repay. Regarding your question, it's not an easy one. I don't think. So this is something which is going to happen in the future. This means we should have a guarantee. So there is a risk of lower income level. So you need to know how to evaluate from a risk point of view. And I go to the board of directors and will be able to prove that it's safe. Thank you. Time is up. I would like to thank our speakers, and the introduction of new tools will bear fruit.